Cannot wait, cannot wait.
We're going to move on to our final speakers for this thematic session, two academics here to tell us all about the current state of national metadata, which we've just touched on. We have joining us Barbara Šlibar, who is from the Faculty of Organization and Informatics at the University of Zagreb in Croatia, and also Enrique Mu, Professor of Management at Carlow University in the United States. Let me turn over the floor to you, Enrique. I think you're going to kick things off in this joint presentation, telling us about how we can unlock open data benefits on national levels. Or perhaps, Barbara, are you going to kick it off? Hello.
Okay. Sorry.
We have you now. Great. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself. Okay. Well, thank you. So we're going to talk about the current state of national metadata and how to unlock the open data benefits. Governments are deploying open government data and in order to realize the expected benefits. On the left, you can see a report by Odin, and the black line refers to the growth in the extent of openness of the data according to the open data definition. And the yellow line at the bottom also shows a constant increase in the coverage of the open government data. What it means by coverage is the type of data that is being published, financial data, gender, social, education. So the coverage has been also increasing constantly, and altogether means an increase in the overall quality of the data, open government data published. And as I said, all this happens because there is an awareness that open data has a positive impact in society, improves government through transparency and tackling corruption, empowers the citizens because allow a mechanism in which there is a participatory decision-making process, create opportunities through fostering innovations, and solves public problems by allowing data-based engagement of the citizens. Now, open government data requires that that in addition to the data that is published, that we have metadata also published. Metadata is information about the data resource. The typical example is that if the resource is a report, a book, the metadata is the information that we need to locate that resource, like the title, author, publisher, etc. Let's see this better with an example of the two dimensions that we covered in our study. The metadata, the two key dimensions that we focused in our study was completeness, which means that when a piece of information, a field, is needed, is requested, then it is present. And consistency, meaning that when the publisher guidelines indicate that the field must be formatted in specific ways to make the field valid, then this is also complied. And in the case of the book, an example of metadata guideline would be that the country data portal could state that the title of the report must always be present. Without a title, we cannot really even look for it. And also, the guidelines could state that the title must always contain alphabetic characters. So there may be other characters, but there has always need to be alphabetic characters, like here, Open Data Maturity Report 2020. There are these numbers 2020, but there is alphabetic character. So these two things are very important. However, in our study and our work for the past 2 years, we found that metadata guidelines are not always followed by the publishers. When guidelines are not followed, in real life, if we don't follow the guideline of stopping at the red light, bad things can happen, like a crash. In the case of open government data, nothing so dramatic happens. However, if the guidelines for the metadata are not followed, the metadata will be insufficient or will be invalid, and it will not allow the users to really access, locate, use, or reuse the published data properly, losing the expected benefits. And to discuss in more detail what we did and what we found and how is this important for our community, I'll give the floor to my colleague, Barbara Šlibar.
Thank you, Enrique. First of all, I'd like to give you an overview of the study that we carried out. So we started to think whether really OGD country portals publish data that follow their own guidelines. In other words, is the metadata published on the country portals compliant with their own metadata publishing guidelines? Since you would expect to be so. So we decided to explore the top open data leading country portals according to the Open Data Barometer. And our Open Data Barometer is a global measure that ranks governments according to readiness and impact of open data initiatives and implementation of OD programs. What we did, we examined, for example, whether the metadata published on the country portal A is compliant with the metadata publishing guidelines of the country portal A. And the same was done for the other country portals that were participating in our study. Actually, out of the top 10 country portals listed in Open Data Barometer Leaders Edition from 2018, we selected to examine 3 of them, Canada, New Zealand, and USA. So we chose them because we had found out that they have clear metadata publishing guidelines. Maybe not clear, but they were clear enough that we were able to create rules based on them, and because they were written in English. To clarify this, we can say that we defined a list of exclusion criteria based on which we determined appropriate country candidates. The answer to our question if the metadata is compliant is unfortunately no, not really. After examination of 3,000 data sets, we found out that quality control is very, very poor. And if you look at the table shown on this slide, you can see that in one of those 3 countries, 62% of data values in the required fields were valid. And in the terms of fields that should be set, that should be present, in one of the observed country portals, only 81% of required fields were set. And as you are all aware, if the data is required, you would expect that it would be compliant 100%. To put it more simply, let me explain this with a simple example, such as buying books online. Imagine if you could not find a book on Amazon Books by the title because someone didn't enter the book title, or because someone didn't check if the book title is entered, or maybe because the intertitle is not validated. For example, because typos are not checked. For sure, this would have serious implications on customers as well as on the corporation. Customers would not be satisfied, and they would probably decide to buy a book somewhere else, while the corporation would lose customers and therefore income. And as you can see here on this slide, none of the country portals reached 100% expectation. And this directly indicates that there is a lack of metadata compliance, even for simple dimensions like completeness and consistency that we observed in our study. Finally, I'd like to address that we noticed that there are two main issues. One is that publishers are not respecting the guidelines, and the other one is that people in charge of these country portals, such as portal administrators, don't enforce their own guidelines. So something needs to be done about this. All of this led us to the next question, which is what can be done? In the same way, whenever the drivers are not respecting the traffic rules, such as stopping at a red light, we have traffic policemen in charge of controlling traffic. Or rather, we can say that we have them for enforcing the rules. In our case, the equivalent of installing police enforcement is the establishment of systems of portals in such a way that publishers would not be able to publish metadata that doesn't follow guidelines. So the idea is to automate the enforcement of this for at least simple quality and dimensions such as completeness and consistency, as it's shown on the right side of this slide. And in such a way, the country portals would be able to easily detect when a field that should be present is missing, or would be able to detect when a field that should have to follow certain rules is not following those rules. And at the same time, they would prevent non-proper publishment. So enforcement is really, really needed. It should be emphasized that only if the metadata follows the publishing guidelines, then the expected benefits would be obtained. Otherwise, the data won't be easy to locate, won't be easy to use, and won't be easy to reuse. And the expected benefits of the deployment of the open government data will be lost. Or we can say that it would be seriously, seriously diminished. Finally, I'd like to conclude by highlighting the important implications of our study for different OGD stakeholders. First of all, for the end users, our study creates awareness that the metadata quality is not as good as it should be. Secondly, for the publishers, this is a call to attention that they should make the best effort to fulfill the publishing guidelines. You know, sometimes in our interest to publish things quickly, we can be careless. But when we are doing this, we are really threatening the ability of data to provide benefits, to provide expected benefits, because it won't be easily accessible or maybe misinterpreted. Thirdly, for the country portal administrators, this is a call to provide clearer metadata publishing guidelines, preferably in a machine-readable format. Because many portals use one metadata name within the documentation and a different one you will find in the real data. Also, for the country portal administrators, this is a call to engage in either the quality control by ensuring that the published metadata is fulfilling the established guidelines, or even better, to engage into quality assurance process and enforcing that metadata publishing guidelines are followed. And ideally, this should be done throughout automated procedures. Therefore, we should keep in mind that metadata quality assurance is key to unlocking expected OGD benefits. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you both very much indeed for that insightful overview. We have a couple of questions here from our audience members. Bastiaan van Leunen has said, do you have an explanation why the open data portals do not enforce or check compliance with their own metadata policies? And also, how do you ensure that metadata is up to date?
Yeah, we didn't have survey for country portal administrators. So relating to the first question, we cannot, we don't know why they don't enforce this. And the second one was,
how do you ensure that metadata is up to date?
Yeah, because you have keys for that, metadata keys, fields that you can see if the data is up to date, but we cannot be sure. There is no guarantee if this is right for now because of the situation.
And then a final question from Friedemann asking, do you compile data on the accessibility of government policy data, such as draft laws or agenda papers? If not, do you have any suggestions where they might find such an overview of this kind of data?
Maybe Enrique can answer this one.
Well, we haven't really examined this in detail because the focus was more whether the quality of the metadata was honored according to the publishing guidelines. We probably need to think a bit more about that question.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You've exhausted our audience already. We just had those very specific questions for you because I think you covered everything really well in your presentation, which is always nice to see. So thank you both very much. And indeed, thank you to all our speakers in this thematic breakout session. I will remind our audience that all the presentations will be published online together with a recording of the sessions. So if you missed anything or want to go back and check anything, you can go to the EU Open Data Days website and you'll find all that information there. The next up we've got coming up in just a few moments is a plenary on data science in the fight against COVID-19. That's starting in the main plenary room in just a few moments. And tomorrow, I'll give it a little bit of a plug, our thematic session 3 will be on using data viz for policy making. So if you're interested in that, please do join me tomorrow for that. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the plenary and the rest of EU Data Days. Don't forget, keep sharing using the hashtag.